Welcome to the King's Couch. I'm your host, Sulo King. I work as a nutrition and lifestyle coach here in San Diego, and primarily my background used to be in the music industry. I worked here in the San Diego music industry for the last 20 years. I've done everything from working as a concert promoter to an artist and band manager to owning and operating a recording and rehearsal studio for over 7 years. So I decided to take my journey to the next level and start this podcast show. And I'm very pleased to announce my very first guest, who happens to be an old friend of mine from high school. His name is Tristan, and he works as a yoga teacher. And what else is it that you do?
And also a massage therapist.
And he's got a very interesting story to tell. I'm very proud of his journey. I find it very inspiring.
Thank you.
And I just want to share it with others. So why don't you start off from the beginning? Go back to how you got into yoga, how you got into spirituality, and we'll just kind of start off your story from there.
Yeah, sounds good. I've been practicing Vinyasa yoga for about 10 years. I've been teaching overall for the last 5 or 6, and teaching full-time as well as massaging for the last 2. My story started about, as I mentioned, 10 years ago. I had just had a bad breakup, and I was 70 pounds heavier than I am now. And I realized that I was nearing 30, and that if I didn't do anything about this, that I was going to stay this way. At least that's what I had in my head. And I had heard about yoga through some Buddhism podcasts I'd started listening to, and there were some studios in my area, so I thought I'd give one a shot. And I went to a studio called Open Doors in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and it was a 90-minute heated Vinyasa power class. And afterwards, I was completely drained. My clothes were just soaked with sweat. I laid in bed that afternoon and evening just tired and fatigued, and I really hadn't kind of just, what was I doing, or what was that I just did? But something told me, you have to keep doing this, and it just kept calling me to it. So I started going 2 to 3 times a week, and also going to the gym and watching what I ate, which was more calorie counting and not, proper nutrition. But I really found a kind of a safe space there, because just as being as overweight as I was, I kind of felt very self-conscious at the gym, and I sweat very easily. So to find a place where you can sweat and no one's going to judge you was a very big thing for me. And within that first 6 months or so, I lost 50 pounds. And I think one big thing is I didn't give myself a deadline. I was just going to say, I'm going to do this. Whatever happens, happens. If I lose weight, awesome. And I just kept going for a few years, switching back and forth between various Vinyasa-based studios, which we can get into the meaning of that. There's several styles. And around 2014, I was trying to still make it in the office world, in the corporate world, and it was just very unsuccessful. I left almost every job on bad terms, and a lot of it was kind of realizing I didn't like the work and I didn't have any passion for it.
When you say you left on bad terms, what exactly do you mean by that?
I was either flat out fired, or things were so bad with my performance that I found another job before they could fire me.
Oh, wow. So you weren't happy at that point in your life.
I think I would go to these companies and I'd buy into the idea of what the company did, but because it was admin work and office manager work, I just never took ownership of it. So I think it's realizing that it wasn't a good fit for me, but also knowing I didn't put forth the right effort.
Right.
So I know it was like a mutual
yeah.
But, around that time, I decided to do a yoga teacher training that was shorter than your normal basic 200. Well, the intro to say you're a yoga teacher is the 200-hour, but there was a studio called Core Power that is very big here in San Diego, and they had just moved out to Boston, and they have a format called Sculpt, and it's basically a yoga HIIT workout It's a lot very more fast paced. I play 90s music in my classes, and it's a 5-week course that's just to get you introduced to being a sculpt teacher, but not being a real full on Vinyasa teacher. So I did that, and it was only just going to be a part-time thing while I tried to make the office thing work monetarily. But I noticed I had a gift for it, and I kind of felt like my authentic self that wasn't wrapped up in ego and insecurities. When I was on the other side of the mat, it started to come out.
Right. Were you doing massage therapy at that time too? Or is that something that came later?
So I think, 2010. So a year after I had started practicing yoga, I was with a friend, and I was mentioning my struggles in the office world, and someone else in my life had mentioned, why don't you be a massage therapist? And at that time, I was still overweight, and as I mentioned, I sweat very easily. So I just thought, I don't want to sweat on anybody.
Yeah, right.
But at that point, I had lost the weight, so I looked into massage school, and it was viable. So I went at night and on weekends. So at that point, I had been massaging part-time for about 2 or 3 years. But because I was living in Boston and my family and support network was here in California, I just couldn't make it financially work. So I always had to work these just frustrating office jobs that I didn't want to be at.
Right. Yeah. I've been there before. I think one of the worst jobs I had is senior year of high school. I was working at a telemarketing job, and it was sounding like the bullshit long distance service. And I remember I got fired from that job right after I graduated high school. I only worked there for maybe 6 months. And I looked at my boss and was like, well, you know what? I don't know what to tell you. How can you expect me to sell a service that just is a ripoff? Some of these, random phone calls I'm making, these homeowners are so aware that this is blatantly just like a candy-coated script trying to hustle them into the service, So I remember that feeling, and I went from being like a daydreamer, just loving music and going to shows back then in Soma, that all ages venue.
I remember Soma.
Yeah, seeing all these people in bands and throwing their own shows, and I wanted every aspect of that. And it took me up until I was like 22 to get to that pivotal point. But sometimes you just realize you're calling. You know what I mean?
And with those positions, you go into these trainings, and I think the word for me early on with these positions is forced camaraderie and forced excitement over this thing that you're like, this is not even if it's not a scam, this is not as important as you're making it out to be.
Yeah.
And just trying to force it on you so that you can force it on these people. Yeah.
Right.
Some people, they can do it, and that aspect of sales is in their blood. But just for some people who are authentic, they just can't push that.
Right.
And own that.
And then there's people that they're great as salesmen, but they just can't sell a certain product, and that's where I ran into that problem, I was like, I can't sell a service that is basically like cheating people in line to people, that's just not me. But it's interesting how my journey led to where I'm at today, and now I'm working as a health coach, which is a total 180. But going from the office world with you to starting to study yoga, did you know early on when you were practicing yoga that you wanted to eventually, turn around and teach?
So when the first 5 years I was practicing, I was just like, this is what I do to stay fit. And there was one studio before Core Power that one of the teachers approached me and said, we think you'd be good for teacher training. And in my head, I just had a very defeatist mentality at the time. I'm like, no, I wouldn't be. I don't want to get in front of other people, and I'd be so nervous. And doing the sculpt training was kind of out of desperation of all right, what else is there if I can't work in an office? Mm-hmm. And I distinctly remember before my first ever sculpt class that I taught, I was talking to a friend, and I said, I'm teaching my first yoga class. I never thought I'd be doing this. And this friend went, are you kidding me? You were born to be a yoga teacher. And this person had done classes with me before, and they just saw my practice and my involvement with it. So that really sticks with me of just realizing that I think one big theme in my life is some people see this person in me that I don't see, and not trying to embrace them seeing that person or trying to embrace that person, but defining it for myself and really like holding on to it and like walk around my chest high and realizing that I always go back to that moment and realizing that, yeah, this is my calling to do this. And it's weird now being on the other side and being so locked in and having teacher brain and just looking back 5 years ago, just not thinking I was ever going to be able to do anything with this. And I wanted to just be part-time and was really, when I moved back to San Diego, wanted to make the office thing work for the money. And I'll become one of these rock star yoga teachers in San Diego on the side. And just realizing too that there's way more work involved. There's way more teacher trainings. There's way more stuff that you can do to become an even better teacher that I'm doing now. That funny, when I first moved back here, I was like, man, my classes are really small and like I'm not getting the reception I thought I'd get. And then the more I stopped thinking about that and just leaning into the education of being a yoga teacher, the more people started coming to my classes and like really coming for me. So, and what I could offer them. So I think that was a big part of my maturation, is just getting out of my head.
Right. Yeah, I hear you, man. Getting out of your head is definitely the hardest part, especially as like an artist. You know, you're your own worst critic. So when you started doing yoga and decided that you wanted to go on and teach, what kind of certifications did you have to go through? Were there certain forms of yoga that really fascinated you more than others? And what type of yoga classes do you teach? Is it one specific form or is it multiple forms? Are you incorporating fitness in with yoga at the same time? You mentioned something about sculpt, which, you know, sounded very interesting.
So in the westernized yoga world, the standard, you're a certified yoga teacher that can teach a class somewhere, is the 200-hour certification. And there's actually kind of some controversy about that now, because there's a lot of feeling that it's being dumbed down and like anyone can do this now. And basically, to make money as a yoga studio, you make your money doing teacher trainings, like not so much the student memberships. And Core Power, they always have 200-hour programs going and sculpt programs going, so I decided to do it through them. But for a few years, I just kept it at that. And like the baseline, what they taught me, which is basically, these are your basic introductory poses. These are the muscle groups that are engaged. These are the cues to use and the formula to do it, and stick to that. Now, so the next level up, you can say, is the 300-hour training, which I'm in two different ones right now. One is through Miramar College, and one is through the studio I currently teach at, Yoga 6. And it's way more about the history of yoga and incorporating that into your teachings, and about like chakras and nadis and all that other stuff that you hear beyond the physical workout. But in terms of different styles, mine is Vinyasa, which Vinyasa means union of breath to movement. Well, union in general. Well, yoga, that's what yoga means, but Vinyasa means breath to movement. So a lot of the more flowy, like you inhale into this position, you exhale into this position. There's other styles like Bikram, where it's hot.
Oh,
and
yeah.
you're holding positions longer, and there's a lot more concentrated breath work that you're sitting for. There's something called Hatha, which you're holding Vinyasa-like poses for long periods of time. There's restorative ones which is different from Yin, but they have the same principle of holding these poses in order to either lengthen the fascia along your body or to lengthen your muscle fibers. So the type I teach is very finding that mindfulness through the breath to movement, and I think now, for me, it's trying to harness that energy and bring that off your mat of living mindfully. And my theme this week was show up, like fully and present with where you are and what you're doing. And I think yoga's the only way. So it turns out I've realized a lot of yoga teachers don't like meditating or can't, and this is our way of doing it. So I think this is the perfect way of introducing meditation into movement.
Right. That's interesting. You'd think that most yoga teachers would know how to properly, meditate in some format.
Yeah.
I know. Wow. But, I mean, that goes with any industry that you're in, and then some people look at it as just a job or a career. And then some people are passionate about it. In my opinion, the ones that you see are absolute naturals and really care about, like, who they're trying to educate or who they're trying to teach or provide that service for, are the ones that, in my opinion, are probably the most successful and most passionate about, whatever, their service they're providing.
And that's been the hardest parts for me of, as a yoga teacher, you kind of have to live this lifestyle, as you mentioned, in order to be successful at this.
Yeah.
Like, you can't preach something in your class and then immediately go outside and do the opposite, which is what I was doing. Like, I deal with a lot of anxiety and flat out, like, anger. That's how it manifests. And I think one thing I've been realizing lately is my talent and my intelligence, that's never been a question. It's that mental resilience, that emotional resilience to just keep at it when the things get tough. And I think yoga helps that to an extent, but and where it can just help you get back to the breath and be current and not get lost in your ideas. And that's what I do. I'm an overthinker. I'm lost in, like, I go in one thought train, then it spirals into this movie plot that's created in my head. And just trying to put it out there of, like, yoga isn't just what you do on your mat for an hour. It's like you have to take that off your mat in order for it to work.
Interesting perspective. Yeah. I'm the same type of free thinker. If I had to classify my level of ADHD, it'd be through the roof right now. I don't think there's a number I could really pinpoint on that, but that's how I look at music. It's the same mentality, and I don't think just inside the box. I think, what can I do creatively to be different and, brand myself as doing something a little more unique, rather than just trying to follow, like, the current trend or what everyone else is trying to do. Or it's not like I'm trying to reinvent the wheel, but I don't want to just be, like a fair weather fan, and, it's interesting, as we're having this conversation, I'm starting to learn a little more about, yoga. And I've noticed, just from what I've followed from all, the different people that I'm friends with, or people in my network that are into yoga, or even some of the, online social media followers or friends that I have, there's so many different styles of it. And I feel like especially in the last 10 years, people have become a lot more health conscious, more innovative. Yoga's evolved into all these subcategories. There's subcategories for pretty much everything, but it's really fascinating. Which brings me to my next question. So, as a yoga teacher, what is it that you like to classify yourself as doing differently than other yoga teachers? Like, is there a certain style that you teach, or did you come up and create, like, your own and formulate your own program? You mentioned that you do teach at a yoga studio right now. And then the next question I have after this is, do you see yourself, like, opening up your own studio one day?
So a lot of what I bring is, with the trainings I've been doing lately, it's catering it to certain anatomical movements and trying to treat the body as a whole, and leaning that into the energetic part of the yoga practice. For me specifically, personally, I've been getting feedback from a lot of the teachers I've been doing trainings with that if you incorporate your story into how you teach and how you mention the lessons you learn. So when you're teaching a class, like a lot of, more advanced teachers, they incorporate a theme. Like I mentioned this week, it's show up. And at little points when you're holding your poses, the teacher will come back to that. and we'll start telling you, why this matters. And hopefully by the end of the practice, once you've all said namaste, that message will hit. And I keep getting told, like, yeah, there's the chakras and all this stuff that, yeah, we're going to practice to open up the heart chakra today. But for me, it's like leaning into the motivational things that have helped you along your journey. And like you said, like, it's still weird to see that, like, I've heard other people like, man, your story's so inspiring. But I think to me, it's just looking back at like all the changes that I've made. And I think that's one of my biggest messages overall. And when they say like, what's your why, is just trying to prove that you can change and that you can make those adjustments in your life to get better. And you don't have to, resign yourself to this is the way things are. So in terms of that message, I think like the way I theme how yoga's impacted me and how I teach that, I think that's the big thing, is just knowing that this is a transformative process and practice that can just bridge the gap and open channels into other areas of growth for you. In terms of like a style perspective, it's San Diego. I started training some mixed martial arts a few years ago, specifically jiu-jitsu, but I went back to my old gym, Victory MMA, down by the sports arena.
And we'll get into that in a little bit.
And I was working with their now striking coach. We ran into each other at a cultural fair. And over the last 6 months during the pandemic, I would go to her place and I'd teach her yoga for an hour and she'd give me a boxing lesson. And I found that yoga for jiu-jitsu and MMA, they really do just see it as stretching. And all of these trainings I'm doing lately, there's a lot of yoga biomechanics of like how much load you're bringing forth when you lunge. And I think to present to them that it's not just flexibility, but also mobility and strength training, in the sense that you're doing certain poses that mimic a lot of what you do. Like when you're in a lunge, that is kind of like your fight stance, and your body weight training certain like little muscles that you don't normally think about when you're doing your weight training program. So, and also how I found a lot of these people can get into a cage or get into a mat and they can stay completely calm and be cool when they're sparring with someone. But if I ask you to just stand there in a yoga pose for longer than 30 seconds, it makes them go insane. So just focusing that yogic energy of not, Zen, like, but to have that focus that when something's presented in front of you, just breathe. And I think that's one of my favorite UFC fighters, Israel Adesanya. He does a lot of breathing and mindfulness exercises, and it's for that reason of when someone's trying to like throwing 6 strikes at me, I'm just going to breathe and move out of the way. And I think that's what I want to present next is, like you mentioned, in terms of the next step, one of my mentors, Zach Armstrong, he hit it big of there's only so much money and only so much energy you have running around teaching 30 classes a week, and in my case, massaging people. In order to do something, the next step, there's workshops, so I found it's either own a studio, which I really don't have the desire to do because the business aspect of a brick and mortar is just not right now. I just don't have the desire to learn or manage that. And then there's teaching teachers, which is leading teacher training programs. And I'm not saying I wouldn't want to do that, but just right now I see myself leading yoga students more than teaching teachers how to become better or how to become teachers in the first place. And then there's content creation, which there's online courses, there's modules, there's like an Instagram page, which I started where I do like self-care tips, and a podcast that I started. So the next level is going beyond that weekly grind of I'm going to go to this studio and teach here and teach there, but just having that passive income where you're not teaching, but you're still making money. Right.
Okay. Interesting. And at this, what was the name of the studio that you're working at currently?
Yoga 6.
Do they, are you teaching students out of that?
Yeah.
They have like a teacher program type deal there?
So
or how's that work exactly? So you teach classes and then you also teach students, right?
Oh no, it's just teaching. It's just teaching classes to students.
Oh, so you're teaching people to become yoga instructors.
Oh no,
okay.
Teaching yoga classes.
That's what I was trying to differentiate.
Like, we offer that teaching people how to become teachers, but I just don't. like, and there is money in that, but in the training that I'm in now, where they're teaching me how to become a better teacher, there's a lot of people it's a very safe space, so people just let everything out, myself included.
Right.
I don't know if I have the energy to like manage all that over like 6 weeks, 8 weeks.
Right.
So I'm not saying I don't have it yet, but I think for me, monetization hopefully is content creation. Right now it's still a hobby, not a business.
Yeah.
But hopefully down the line it'll get big enough where I can start selling it.
Yeah, and content creation it's hard to really wrap your mind around. I mean, let's take a look and sway the conversation into where we're at in the digital age with influencers. Yeah. And anyone can just easily call themselves a coach these days. I know they can go online and take a simple little 15-hour course and just print out their certification and call it a day. Or anyone can just self-proclaim themselves as a health coach. Right. And influences are like a dime a dozen. I mean, it cracks me up, like, you know, especially with these pranksters, like how many YouTube subscribers and followers they have. And then I'll look at someone more meaningful and impactful, in my opinion, and they don't even come close. So I really wanted to get your opinion on what you're trying to do with social media as far as being an influencer, as far as being a health coach, and how you would want to differentiate yourself from what everyone else is doing, rather than just trying to follow the current trends of, you know, this is going back to like what I was kind of mentioning earlier in this conversation.
So the training I did before with Miramar College, the passion project the final project I had was originally going into one-on-one and group coaching. But I have the same frustration that you brought up of I don't have like a certification for a wellness coach or a lifestyle coach, but I feel like anyone can just do that. And I don't want to call myself a life coach because to me that implies I'm good at life, and I'm not. I don't think any of us are. So what I started with my page was yoga and self-care from a massage therapist perspective. And I think self-care gets a weird rap these days of, you know, what that means. Like some people think that's like go take a bath or, you know, go to spa day, or other people means like let's go for a hike, and, you know, just that general taking time for you. And for me, I think I've realized that I teach 15 to 20 yoga classes. I give like 15 to 20 massages. I try to train 3 to 5 days a week. And just realizing I need to maintain a certain level of energy to do all that. And I go back to The Rock when he was talking to the Lakers, and he was like, I get up at 4:30 and I ground myself in the idea that I'm going to outwork everybody. And I realized that, well, not all of us are The Rock. Not all of us are Elon Musk, and just have that relentless energy. You can just go at it. And not all of us are David Goggins, if you know.
Oh, yeah. I follow him. Yeah. He's great. And I love Dave Goggins because he is just raw. Yeah. You know, you'll see him jogging and just totally going off on a rant. Not everyone is capable of doing that, you know, so he's pretty inspirational.
And I realize, like, most of us mere mortals can be like that, but throughout the day we have to take breaks to get our energy back. So that's what I really wanted to push, that I'm still trying to get back into once my trainings are over, is pushing, all right, you've been in the grind for like a few hours, like take a break, like stretch, breathe, like journal something. And I kind of my social media kind of got away from that, but I think that's like I got a kind of a reminder of that this last week, of that's what people follow you for. They're not following you to see you doing some fancy pose at Balboa Park. They want to know all the stuff that you're learning at doing what you do. How does that help them?
Yeah, exactly. There's a million people out there that are posting different yoga poses, and I mean, I follow all the you know, top influencers, or, you know, I'm just fascinated by, you know, why people are what gravitated them towards spirituality or yoga or fitness, martial arts, whatever it may be, you know, when it comes to the mind, body, and soul. And it's interesting that you said that. And I'm brand new to this career of being a health coach. And like you said, like life coaching, yeah, I just got certified as a life coach, but I'm not going to sit here and call myself a life coach. I like lifestyle coach because I'm going to give you mindful advice on how to live your life better. Mental is half the battle. Yeah. And, it's like you were saying, you take breaks. Mm-hmm. We, as human beings, like some people are very easily capable of doing that and very regimented. Others just go at one speed and don't know how to stop until they hit that wall and completely crash and burn. And I watch that happen to people all the time. With like my patients, I always, especially during the pandemic when I started in November when, the cases were just going crazy. And at the medical center I work at, we do full COVID testing. It was insane. A lot of mental toughness, a lot of people with like sleepless nights and just anxiety and depression. And what I try to do as a health coach is really just boost their morale and educate them on trying to find ways to, just calm and ease your mind, especially right before you go to bed, because sleep, rest, and recovery is a very vital and important thing. Yeah. And it's something that, you got to practice. So, it's interesting. Throughout all this experience, I learned that right before you go to sleep, it's not recommended to meditate because it'll still overstimulate your mind. And you think that, no, it would relax my mind, but I've learned quite a lot. And the goal of doing this whole podcast show is to also learn more and be able to have people like you on this show to help inspire and influence others and share their stories and struggles, because it's, we're not all great at life, like you said. I don't think anybody is. Behind closed doors, we're all struggling with something, and most people have a hard time really admitting and expressing their emotions in a proper way. And what I try to do is I try to educate people and finding something like a hobby, something that they can use as a creative outlet, even if it's something as simple as reading. Mm-hmm. Just immerse yourself in a whole nother world. And my whole point I'm trying to get at really is take time to yourself to relax. Even if it's 15 minutes a day, I don't care if you have to set a timer, what you got to do, just try to relax. Enjoy yourself. We only live once.
And it's a double-edged sword with the demographic we work with, because we work with people who are automatically open to change and that see change as growth. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people that don't see change as – they see that as weakness, or they see that as, well, I learned everything I needed to learn in this one thing years ago. I don't need to learn anything else. So,
the stubborn people like that. Or – they'll have the mentality that asking for help is considered weakness, which I've ran into quite a bit. And I'll notice some of my patients don't come back. They just get stubborn, or they don't understand. Like I specialize in microcurrent neurofeedback. And, I explain to them that everyone reacts differently to these treatments. It all depends on, how tolerant you are, and they don't fully understand it or grasp the concept behind it. And, hey, at first I didn't really either. I thought it was just like something you see in a movie, but it's a fascinating science, neuroscience.
So specifically for you, like why people react the way they do to anything? Anything. And that to me, like fascinates me. And I feel like every time, because I have to, before I do like a neurofeedback treatment or see a patient, I have an intake form I have to go through. I have a set of questions that I ask them. What symptoms are you experiencing? And, most importantly, to start it off, why are you here? Yeah. And everybody's different. And I've seen a variety of patients from all ages, from the elderly to young kids that are suffering from autism or strokes or seizures, to elderly stroke patients that are in recovery. And it's interesting because you got to treat everybody differently, and I got to explain to people, especially when I'm doing neurofeedback, also everybody responds differently. So, you can't expect this to work just overnight. It may take 10 sessions. Yeah. And I think that's one thing people don't realize is for a lot of these challenges you deal with, whether it's an addiction or whatever you're triggered by, because I think that's the big thing, like word for me with training is triggers. It's a lot of it's going to be a lifelong process, and you're going to have to deal with it day to day. And I think a lot of what I've been dealing generationally and culturally is just pretending like or acting like you can just snap out of it or sweep it under the rug and then everything is cured. And it's like, no, like you can't just take one course and then all of a sudden everything's going to be great. You can't just see a therapist for 6 months and then all of a sudden you're cured. Like this is going to be an ongoing thing. And when I do boxing training, she's like, you're working on your triggers, man. When you get triggered, you don't know, you're fine when you're calm, but when you get triggered, that's when, the real you pops out, and your real you right now isn't calm.
Right. Yeah. And that's another thing too, that I try to help people with is, like you just said, triggers. What is it that triggers you? Because I've dealt with so many people that are anxious ridden. I know, anxiety wise, that there's even certain things, whether it's food or sugars or caffeine, that can help trigger and really inflate that level of anxiety. Yeah. And I box too. I've been boxing since 2015. I'm not trying to do it for any kind of competitive reasons. Sure. More self-defense and just fitness. And let's be real, it just feels great hitting something. Yeah. I don't do a whole lot of sparring. It's mostly working on biomechanics and technique, but yeah, I mean, it's something that I got into and was so interested in, and it's going back to like what you were saying before. It's like you almost kind of have a little bit of fear, but you don't know until you try something if you're going to like it and if you're going to stick at it. And a lot of people just throw in the towel quickly. I have this catchphrase that I always say: I don't throw in the towel, I just use it to wipe the sweat off my face. Nice. I like that. And I just kept going. And yeah, am I a great boxer? No, not really. But when I'm not thinking about it or letting loose, it's just. Yeah. Then I'm there. My problem is I overanalyze shit way too much.
For sure.
Yeah, but that's brings me to like the next point that I wanted to get into is how you got into fitness. You said you've been training in martial arts, jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, not too seriously. MMA specifically. I had spent 10 years in Boston, and I had no idea that in that decade I had left, San Diego had become this jiu-jitsu mecca.
Oh, yeah.
Studios, schools everywhere. And I started same way for like self-defense. I actually started at a Krav Maga gym, Krav Maga Academy, San Diego.
Okay.
But as I started doing more grappling classes, in terms of striking, I'm like, yeah, I'm in my mid-30s. I don't want to get hit. I'm too pretty, and I'm like, my brain only has so many hits it can take left.
Yeah.
And with grappling, just when I got that first tap, I was like, wow, that was cool. I didn't know I could do that. So I got that bug, and I bounced around a bunch of different gyms, and I was trying to do the competition thing and trying to do like a camp, but I realized it kind of you have to take it seriously, and I just didn't have the time and energy. And the gym I left last year, it's actually considered one of the best gyms in the world. But I kind of, when we're talking about like the work that we're doing and triggers, my inner child throws a tantrum when he doesn't feel like he's being listened to. And I just felt like at the time, I'm like, you guys aren't helping me, and you're not like paying attention to me because I can't get you any money. And I think that was just a cover for like I wasn't putting forth the best effort. Like these are top jiu-jitsu competitors. You have to show up every day.
Yeah, you got to make it your life.
Yeah. And I just, especially once I started teaching and left the office and my body became my career, I just couldn't put that mental aspect to it. So I left, but in a way where I was just like, man, there's just something unfinished. And once I started really leaning into, all right, I've got to do something bigger with being a yoga teacher and massage therapist beyond just running around the city, I realized, all right, I know a lot of people have said, coaches, teachers, everywhere, you're your own biggest enemy and your biggest opponent's in your head. And I realized the only way I'm ever going to like figure this out and get to the next level and build that toughness, that mental resilience is getting in on that mat and doing something uncomfortable and rehumbling myself, because I do tend to my family, like, I just learned that we have a big ego problem, and I felt at the time like I can admit that it was just my ego that got in the way. And I know that training now, like, that's the big part of it, is just knowing no matter how much of a badass you think you are, there's someone in that room that's better than you and can kick your ass. And are you okay with that? And I think I was so predisposed in my youth, being programmed to end those moments and go, all right, fine, I quit. And just going, all right, if you're ever going to get to where you want to be in life with your career and just in general, you can't run away from those moments anymore, and you have to show up. And I think that's what yoga, in addition to everyone shown me, is you're calm when things are calm. It's just when the storm comes, like, can you still remain that calm?
And that's what a lot of people, have problems with. It's they fold under pressure, they panic when something goes wrong. I've always been very calm and collective. I don't know how many times the situation's gone on around me and others are like, how can you just sit there and be calm now? It's because I'm trying to, evaluate the situation at hand. And I feel like once you start panicking, the fear sets in, and then the hesitation sets in, and you can't make a good judgment call. And let's be real, we can't always make the right decision.
Yeah, for sure.
Sometimes those split decisions that we make, will work in our benefit, and sometimes they'll backfire in our face. But that's just how life is, I mean, I guess my whole point I'm trying to get across with that is, to stay calm and collective and just don't, it's easier said than done to fold under pressure, but, we gotta train our brain to think that way.
Yeah.
And I've been in those situations before. I used to be that person that would completely freak out and panic when I'm not getting my way, or I'm faced with some kind of adversity, and that's something that is taking years for me to harness. And I feel like a lot of that has come from spirituality and from music. And, my next question as a health coach is blending music therapy into one.
Well, I want to two things about the training, though. That's why I'm very glad I ran into that striking coach, because she brings up, like, ever since I started doing yoga and doing my nidra meditations, I've been undefeated. And, like, I do yoga not just for the flexibility or whatever, but when I'm fighting and a girl clinches me, I just breathe and I don't panic. And I think that, going back to what you said, is just, I think that's what yoga and martial arts have, that parallel of training you to remain calm. And I think that's just one of the biggest things that they both offer. So,
yeah, I agree. And so how long have you been training in martial arts for?
I think 2 or 3. I don't count the pandemic, so like 2 to 3 years now.
Oh, okay. So fairly recent.
Yeah. I think that's the thing, is a lot of the yoga for MMA programs that I'm seeing, these are MMA people first who went into yoga as I don't want to get injured. I would be approaching this as a yoga first thing and a newbie to the MMA. And I think that's what would set it apart, is I would bring more of the yogic. I just feel like it's a lot of what they do is a lot of static stretching, but not that spiritual energy that you're talking about that can be attained through the practice. And like how you can subtly get them to buy into that by telling them that there's more to it than just the flexibility part, but it's still, these are competitive people, so how to properly like challenge them.
Right.
So, yeah, and I think that was the other thing I was going to say, is realizing that I'm really good at what I do, but now I think at this point in my life, everything I'm doing is the gym I go to. I don't know if you know the owner, Jocko Willink. He wrote that book, Extreme Ownership, and his whole thing is discipline. Discipline is freedom. Discipline is freedom. And he was an ex-Navy SEAL, and I realized I was like, I'm not a foxhole guy. I'm like, if we were to a war, you wouldn't want me in your foxhole. I'd be flipping out. And like, but that's a trained muscle.
Yeah.
And that's what you do all this for, is so that you can learn to like so you can be depended on and you can be counted on in those situations. And I
Right.
think that's where both yoga and martial arts can help you if you just embrace that.
Yeah, and that's what I think a lot of fighters don't realize, when they think of yoga, But then you see others that fully embrace it and immerse their lives into it and practice it every day, upon like rising. Yeah, so okay, that's interesting. And what got you into MMA? Like, is that your primary form of fighting, combat sports, or training that you're into?
Well, I think when I first moved back here, I was just doing the gym thing, just lifting and doing cardio. I think it was there's a bunch of martial arts places in San Diego. Why don't I just check one out? And I think the high school we went to, they had started a martial arts program, and I think as a kid I was so scared and not realizing, no, you're supposed to put yourself in that situation.
Yeah.
And I think that was part of it, is realizing that is the ultimate setting for finding comfortability amongst discomfort.
Right.
And
okay.
I think jiu-jitsu hit with me because, granted, injuries, things happen, but at the end of the day, there's the tap, and you're not going to get knocked out, and that long-term damage isn't going to be there. And it's fun to roll, and it is an awesome workout. And I think if you're in the right mindset, you can you expose yourself to these awesome people who can teach you so much about the art and life. So I think I also just from a sports fanboy perspective started getting into the UFC a few years ago.
Okay.
I think I was talking to a friend of it became my new WWE because I was so into pro wrestling as a kid, and then the veil got pulled over it. And it wasn't just that it was fake, but just how how much of a production it is.
Mm-hmm.
And then realizing, what it used to be of you wanting to see two guys kick each other's asses, that's what UFC is now. So I think I got into it, and then realizing, these people are actually really smart and bright and intelligent, and then this is what they do for a living.
Right.
But it's also what makes them such great fighters, is they're not just dumb, meatheads just hitting each other.
Mm-hmm.
There's layers upon layers to them, just like what they do.
Right. Cool. Yeah, because I wasn't sure, how you really got into martial arts. I wasn't sure if you were into it back in high school. Yeah, because I know like Matt was super into that back then. But yeah, that's interesting. So let's shift gears here a little bit and get a little deeper into your life, because I feel like this is really, and I followed this journey with you as much as I can through social media. Let's talk a little bit about when you got sick, and that part of your life and how that's impacted things and changed you.
So I'm a double testicular cancer survivor. My first incident was in 2004, going into 2005. I was a senior at San Diego State, and my left one just started growing. And it was to the point where I couldn't ignore it at the time. And this was kind of around the time Lance Armstrong was doing all of his things. So as cliche as it's become now, the testicular cancer awareness was at its height, and I was just like, something's not right here. But I sat on it because I'm a stubborn guy. And 9 months later, I'm like, okay, this isn't going down. I'm going to go see somebody. And I went to the hospital I was born in, down in Mission Valley, and I saw a urologist, and he looked at me and he goes, so I've seen, and you're the worst case, and I'm really sorry to tell you this, but I really think you have testicular cancer. And what's funny is, given everything we've talked about flipping out in those when big situations and challenges arise, I just looked at him and went, I can still have kids, right? And he'll go, yeah, you'll still have the other one. And I went, all right, tell me what I need to do. And that was one of the few instances where I didn't flip out. I was like, all right, this is what it is. And thankfully, I still caught it enough early in stage 1 where I had the operation to have it removed. I did a month or 2 of chemo, and then a few months of radiation. And that was around, right before my 23rd birthday.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you had to have one removed.
So that was the age is for testicular cancers 18 to 35. So
wow.
My first case was very early on. And then a few years ago, I had moved back here from Boston, and I was training for a jiu-jitsu tournament, and the other one I had left started to grow again too.
Oh, my God.
And at that point, I went, I know what this is. I mean, I've been through this rodeo before. And I went through the tournament, and I went to see a doctor the next day, and he looked at me, and he kind of asked me about my lifestyle, and I was just kind of going hard in the paint training, and he was just like, yeah, you kind of can't be surprised that this happened again. And this time, I had caught it early enough that I just had to have it cut out. And I think I've been very blessed in the sense that I didn't right before the second time happened, I think a year or two, I had decided that I didn't want children. And I was okay with that. And when it happened and the realization had come in of you cannot have biological children now, I was way more accepting of it and be like, all right, that's fine. I can, if I'm ever called to be a parent, I can adopt. It doesn't have to be my blood. And I know that for other guys who, if they had wanted children and they hadn't, and then this happened to them, they would be crushed. So I know that I'm very blessed that I had already changed my perspective and my mindset before it had happened. But with that, I do notice that because I don't have kids and I'm not going to, I have a lot of more time to work on myself. And I think that's why it makes me such a better teacher and therapist. Is a lot of the training I'm doing is also working on me, and a lot of the deficiencies I found early on of like, I tend to procrastinate on things. I tend to be very self-absorbed, and like, I don't tell you anything I admit about myself that I don't think that I'm working on. And like, I'm telling you, like, yeah, I know these things happen, and I think one big mindset thing that I've really embraced is not saying I'm this, like I'm an idiot or I'm a failure, but I can mess up or I can make mistakes, but they don't define me. And I think having cancer twice and like losing all that weight, I've always found them just to be like pushers for something bigger, and just knowing that this was all part of the journey for something. And I think now, within the last few years, as I find my strength and my confidence in my identity as a teacher, that's really what's helped kind of get over this. Why didn't I succeed in the office world? Why didn't I succeed in in the past? Or why did these mistakes happen? So I think for me specifically, getting cancer twice has been way more of a blessing than a burden. But I don't like try to downplay it as part of it, how it's been as part of my journey, because I know it's defined how I live my life now. And I started a podcast called, the long name is How the Fuck Are You a Yoga Teacher, but the short term for SEO purposes is HTF Yoga. And I realized most of us, we did not grow up saying, I'm going to be a yoga teacher. Yeah. And most of us, this is our road less traveled. And we had a plan A and it went awry somewhere. And most of us found yoga from an addiction, a breakup, an issue with their parent, just something. And one thing I've noticed as I've talked to a lot of these teachers, both for the podcast and in general, is a lot of us deal with like trusting ourselves and that confidence to know that we've got this, because I think a lot of us were told early on what we're doing was wrong. You don't know what you're doing. You have to do it our way. And it was by people who either didn't really have our best interest at heart, or they didn't know what they were doing either. And it was just, because you're older than me, I'm supposed to do what you say. So I think now a lot of my message and what I try to, when I do have private yoga clients and stuff, is pushing them of like, use your practice to trust yourself. Because a lot of us didn't grow up learning to trust ourselves. We learned to second guess ourselves and to doubt ourselves. And I think that's one big thing that I've learned throughout my entire journey, is you have to learn how to trust yourself before you can trust anyone else. And I think that's seeing family members who they live in a place of mistrust and fear,
Right.
and like scarcity, and like it really is how you look at everything, and just knowing that these things that you're doing, it's all part of this mindset to change your mindset into something more positive and something more productive and bigger.
Right. Okay. Well, interesting. Well, I got to give you credit where credit's due. I mean, it takes a lot of bravery and courage to go through experience, not just once like that and twice. And for being a man to, some people feel like that's like losing, a piece of your manhood. I mean, if you had to take away from that whole situation and give advice to anyone also going through something like that, what would you say to them?
I think thankfully, because of Lance Armstrong, a lot of that mentality is changing now.
Yeah.
And I now have to, my body can't make testosterone, so I have to inject it into me. And sometimes I actually have more than I used to before. And just because you lose the two things down there, the main thing's still there, and like it's not an issue. And I think just from a mental thing, it's like just knowing not that God chose this for you, but you're going through this for a reason, and that if you just stay strong and just know it's a process and just stay mindful about it, it will make you strong in the other end. And I think you'll also see just how loved you really are and supported you really are when you go out there and you just admit, like, yeah, I'm going through this right now and it's okay, and I'm not afraid to say it, and it's just something I've got to get through. And I think with a lot of struggles, both mentally and physically, with the problems we have, it's just, I think a lot of when you say, yeah, I'm going through this right now, they're soliciting advice, and I think it's like, no, I'm telling you what I'm going through, as in I'm working on this, and like I'm trying to make change. And I think going just back to just as long as you can show that you're capable of making that change.
That's amazing. Yeah. And I'm sure people appreciate that sentiment that you have. Well, let's go ahead and wrap this up here. Tristan, it's been a pleasure to have you on here to catch up with you. I haven't seen you in years.
Oh, it's been 20 years.
I'm glad you're still here with us today, and you got an amazing story. For all the listeners out there, if you had to give them a piece of advice, life advice, what would that message be to them?
Right now, it's, again, trust yourself. Just, you know what you're doing. Just keep at it. Don't second guess yourself, especially when your intuition is just saying, like, this is the right thing for you. And trust yourself and show up. I think one of my biggest struggles that got brought up to me lately is being half aware, like you're only half present, like your head's somewhere else, or you have headphones on, and you're not being present with the person that's with you. And just, I think a lot of the problems can be solved when you just put down your phone and you shut everything off, and you're present either with yourself, whether you're just in a quiet room or you're with someone and you're looking at each other and having an authentic conversation, and not finding an excuse to pull up your device. So just trust yourself and show up, and change can happen.
Awesome. Well, like I said, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. How can people book a class with you? How can they find you on social media?
So you can find me at Tristan Mangindin Yoga on Instagram. So TristanMangindin Yoga. So that's on Instagram. If you're in the San Diego area, I teach at Yoga 6 Bay Park and Yoga 6 Little Italy, so you can look on the app and sign up there. And I also teach at Yoga Box in College area. And I teach power, slow flow, and sculpt, and some restorative yoga as well. And I massage at Mellow Massage in Hillcrest at the Hub. So you can look on lifeismellow.com or themellow.massage on Instagram. And you can find me at TristanYogaSelfCare.com. Website's still under maintenance, so it's trying to build that up. And check out the HTF Yoga Show. You can find that on Spotify, other formats. I'm using Spreaker, trying to get on Apple. But we're about 4 episodes in, getting a good reception. And, yeah, you can look up on that page at HTF Yoga Show as well. So, thank you.
Awesome. All right. Thank you. This is the King's Couch, and this is our first show. Thank you guys for tuning in.